Well, I will definitely be paying attention to the chat, so feel free to keep using it. But it is 1 o'clock and I want to get started on time because we have a lot of information to share. I want to mention, first of all, that we have some resources and a copy of the slides on the website that is on the page right now. I'm going to type that into the chat here soon when I finish talking, but that's at stoppest.org/go/IPM buildings. You'll be able to see the recording of the presentation, the PDF of the slides, and then I assembled a few more building related resources for you there. So before we begin and do our introductions, I have to mention that StopPests is a program of the Northeastern IPM Center, and we're here at Cornell University, but we get our funding to work nationally from HUD's Office of Lead Hazard Control and Healthy Homes. The StopPests program provides free IPM technical assistance and training. We even come on site to HUD-assisted buildings, so definitely stay in touch if that's something you're interested in. And then I have to mention that the products, vendors, or commercial services pictured or mentioned are for illustrative purposes only, and they are not meant as endorsements. This is our website. I encourage you all to check it out if you have a chance. We have an enormous amount of information on pest control, integrated pest management, specific to affordable housing providers. So you can find a lot of resources, and of course, the handouts from the webinar. And that's at stoppest.org. Okay. And I am Susanna Crisco. I'm the Stop Pests in Housing Program Coordinator. My email is up there. If you have any questions post-webinar, let me know or visit the website. Today with us for our webinar, we're going to have two presenters. Dr. Thomas Green founded the IPM Institute, a nonprofit, in 1998. And after many years as the director, he's now serving as the board president. Tom wanted to have some time to do his own consulting work, and he is now the president and founder of IPM Works, LLC, and has many, many years of experience in the IPM field. And we're really thankful to have him today to share his experience. We also have with us Diane Eddings, a housing manager with the Bayview Foundation. The Bayview Foundation, for more than 50 years, has been providing affordable housing in the Wisconsin or Madison, Wisconsin area. And they have a really unique mission that includes inclusivity and building community. So I'm really excited to have everyone, especially Diane, here, because often we do these webinars with an expert and saying what we should be doing, but we often don't have the perspective of the housing managers, which really is a crucial piece to understand how our recommendations really work. I'm going to pass it on to Tom and Diane and turn off my camera and mute myself, and I'll see you guys in the chat. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Susanna. And we'll have Diane introduce Bayview.
Hi, I'm Diane Eddings. I'm the housing manager here at Bayview, and we're located here in Madison, Wisconsin, in the downtown area. And Bayview is just this wonderfully diverse community of housing and a community center. So we are able to provide social services and essential services to the families that live here. And we're also very resident focused and based. So we really are interested in hearing from the residents about what's needed, and use whatever we hear to form programming and to inform our housing decisions as well. We have 277 residents, and we have 102 townhouse units. We're in the process of doing a major redevelopment where we're tearing down all of the townhouse units built in 1971 because they're outdated and just need major renovation. And we're going to be building 130 townhouse and apartment style units. Like I said, our population is extremely diverse. We've got 57% of Southeast Asian residents, 27 Latinx, 14% African American, and 2% white or Native American. And 86% of our residents speak English as a second language. So the housing here is all HUD project-based rent subsidized housing. So 93% of the residents here qualify to get a HUD subsidy, which means they only pay 30% of their income for rent and utilities. So it's extremely affordable for residents. And the average income of the residents who live here is about $15,000 a year. I just wanted to talk primarily about kind of how things were and how things are now. We had a pretty extensive pest control problem, primarily roaches and mice. And we had past experience with a couple different companies that didn't address the problem. We were throwing a lot of money at the problem, but not getting results. And then we found Tom and we invited him to collaborate with us on our pest control problem. And he quickly analyzed the problem and created a step-by-step guide on how we need to address the situation to keep pests out of our units. When Tom retired and started his own pest control business, we felt like we hit the jackpot. Like we were so lucky to have an international pest control expert working for us here at Bayview in Madison, Wisconsin. You know, Tom goes everywhere around the world and then he comes back to us, our little 102 unit project to work with us. So we were so excited to continue to work with him. And we just saw huge improvements. We saw decreases in the numbers of pests and residents were happy. And Tom has a way of doing his work where he's educating both staff and residents at the same time. It's not an adversarial relationship, but a supportive one and an educational one, because that's what we're trying to do is get everybody on board on how to keep pests out of our units. So when we knew we were planning our redevelopment to tear down the old buildings and build new ones, we knew we wanted Tom involved, especially since we're doing a phased redevelopment and moving residents from the old building to the new ones. On a rotating basis, we really wanted to make sure that the units were pest-free so that we didn't move households from one unit to another unit and carry those pests with us. So Tom targeted all 48 units that were going to be moving in September. He increased the number of visits and made sure that there were no issues. And given the fact that we've had previous pest issues for years, we moved 48 households into the new building and didn't have any pest issues. We didn't have any pest transfers. So it worked. Everything he did worked. Secondly, when we knew we were going to do this new building, we wanted Tom involved for the prevention of pests in the new building. We wanted to have him use his exclusion techniques to make sure that we didn't get pests into the building. And then if they got in, that they wouldn't have any harborage. And I just, Tom's going to focus a lot on the construction part of it, but I guess I would just say if you're doing a development that, when you're working with the construction company, they have the generally accepted ideas of what they think sealing is, sealing a unit or a building, but they aren't as robust as IPM principles. And so you want to be very clear up front and embed the IPM principles into the plans and specs of the architectural plans to make sure that the pests keep out, and then if they get in, that they don't have a harborage. So I'm going to pass this off to Tom, and I can't speak highly enough about Tom and kind of all the wonderful things he's done for Bayview. So I'm happy to have him share. Thanks.
Thanks, Diane. That's a great introduction to the community here, which is really a wonderful place to work. And so actually, when I retired in January 2020 from directing the IPM Institute, Diane asked me, hey, now that you're retired, why don't you do our pest control? And that was the genesis of starting this pest control company, Green Pest and Tick. And it's really been great. I finally get to practice what I've preached for many years, working with pest control companies in schools and healthcare and other facilities around the world on a consulting basis for years. And it's been great for my health too. I've got biceps again. I lost 20 pounds and really enjoying it. And I don't advertise, but I stay pretty busy from referrals. And a lot of my work is mouse exclusion. So there's a small street around the corner from my house, and I've done 8 of the 16 houses on that street so far. And the first house, I trapped 55 mice in from the basement up to the attic. And, it's not rocket science. You just figure out how they're getting it in and fixing it. So I have a truck that's outfitted with carpentry and masonry tools, and that's the focus of my work outside of Bayview. And it's great to see the new buildings coming along here. The buildings built in 1971 were not built with pests in mind, and all of the buildings and units are connected with pipe chases and heating pipes, and so it's been a real challenge to address pest issues. But we've done really well. Since I started, when we started, over a third of the units had mice and a third had German cockroach issues. And now we're down to mouse issues being extremely rare, and less than a handful of units have occasional cockroach problems. So what we've been doing, focusing on education and sanitation and exclusion, has really been working, and I feel really grateful to have had this opportunity. So IPM is so important for so many reasons, not just avoiding the nuisance of pests, but for food safety and fire safety and resistance management and pesticide risk management. I don't use any rodenticides in my business. I've been very fortunate to be able to manage rodents with trapping and exclusion. If you paid any attention to what's happening with rodenticide use these days, it's really rampant, and we see the effects in non-targets, raptors, mountain lions, all sorts of animals that will eat rodents that have been exposed to rodenticide. So really important reasons to practice a high level of IPM, and it's effective. As I mentioned, we've just had very excellent results here. And Diane, just the other day, I was in the parking lot, and was a resident here who grew up here, just came up to thank me because she grew up with mouse problems and cockroach problems in her unit, and now our new building is entirely pest-free, and pest problems are rare. So I won't get into how we do that. Our focus today has really been on the renovation project, and the new building that you see there in the upper left is completed now and completely pest-free, 48 units, and the other second phase is in progress, and the third will be completed after the second phase is completed. And we learned a lot doing this project, as you'll see. So what we thought when we started this effort was that we would meet with the builders, and we shared with them a document called Pest Prevention by Design. So if you Google Pest Prevention by Design, it will come up. It's housed at the City County of San Francisco, and it's a document that a number of people, including myself, around the country worked on, that uses language that architects understand to illustrate specs that will reduce pest problems. So it's all focused on avoiding access, avoiding harborage, organizing things so that you minimize nooks and crannies, both inside and outside of buildings. And I met with Diane and Lexi, who manages the community here, and we went through that document and highlighted particular points that we were most concerned about, and then met with the builders and shared this highlighted document. And they were very receptive and kind of reinforced the idea that they were familiar with the need to seal things up, for example, that's included in the fire code, that you don't have openings between units or between floors. So we were really encouraged, and we expected to have a good experience. Well, it wasn't that easy. So they took this document back, they shared it with the architects, but a lot was lost in translation. And when we started to look at the units, started to inspect the units, we found that we were really talking a different language. And so let me go through some of these issues here. So the cabinets that were installed were really had some design issues associated with them. If you can see in the upper left of this picture, there's a plastic clip that's used to hold the back and the side together, and also brace where the countertop is going to sit. And that's just perfect cockroach harborage up there. So that's something that we could have looked at well in advance, but didn't understand that we might run into these issues. So there are utility closets in each of the units, and they were designed, some of them with just the HVAC units in there, and some of them with this combined configuration, so that we have the laundry equipment and the HVAC, which is not ideal. You really want the HVAC in a dedicated closet, and in some cases where that was the case, the closet has this extra space, which is really attractive for storing things in, and for fire safety and other reasons. You really don't want that happening. So that was one of the design issues that we ran into as well. And so we talked about, for the next couple of phases, let's just have dedicated utility closets where the HVAC is in there, and let's take that extra space and put it outside of the closet so it's usable space. So we're going to be struggling with encouraging residents not to store items in here, yet there's attractive and usable space in there. This was another issue. So we have some exposed wiring that runs from that HVAC into the wall here, and if residents are storing things like brooms in the closet, for example, this is going to be really vulnerable to getting pulled out of the wall. You'll notice too that the gap in the wall is sealed with fire caulk, which is really not ideal. Fire caulk is that red clay material, and it's designed to prevent heat and flames from traveling through a penetration, but it's not elastomeric like a sealant would be that we want to use to close up gaps, so that as this wire gets bumped and flexes, it doesn't open up a hole there. And so we went through and ended up resealing these situations here. The cabinets I mentioned, the design isn't ideal in that the false drawer fronts under the sink, for example, have these gaps built into them. And that, of course, is great cockroach harborage and travel away from that under sink cabinet out to the kitchen. Also, when we look at the cabinets from underneath, so we stick our head under where the kick plate is, we find a number of these cavities as well. So the cabinets are built and then fitted into these units. The units have various designs with different shapes and lengths and so forth. And so the carpenters are fitting those cabinets into these units, but not sealing up these cavities that are created where the cabinets meet at the corner, for example. And of course, that's very problematic as harborage for both cockroaches and mice. The wiring for the fan and the hood overneath the range runs through the upper cabinet, and so those wires run through the base of the cabinet, as you see here, and none of those openings were sealed up. So this is all work that we ended up having to address after the fact. And really, these the wiring here should not be running through the panel there. It should be hardwired, and the wiring should be in the wall behind the cabinet and not running through the base of the cabinet. So another design issue there. So the cabinets are up against the wall, and in many cases they're tightly up against the wall, but as you can see here, we have gaps both at the end of the cabinet, between the end of the cabinet and the wall on the left, a very large gap, and then a gap that's running here also along the side of the cabinet and the wall. And of course, this is ideal cockroach habitat and needed to be sealed up after the fact. Here's another gap just between the range hood and the cabinet. And again, ideal cockroach habitat if not corrected after the fact. So that's a host of the design issues that we ran into, that our process of just providing this document and educating the construction folks didn't reach the architects and have the impact that we had hoped that it would have. So then we also have a host of installation issues. And we were particularly challenged in this first phase in that, shortly into the finish stage of the project, the builder started to run out of time and started to run over budget and started to need to get to the next job. And so there was a real rush put on the finish installation. And you could see that progress through the building. So the top floor, which was done first, was done very well. And then the heat started coming on the subcontractors on floors 3 through 1. And you could tell that they really started to get rushed to get through there. And as a result, some of the work suffered. So here's something that's very common in lots of construction. If you're not going to see it, you don't really have to seal it. But of course, that creates perfect habitat between the wall and this backsplash if that bead of caulk is not applied all the way down the side of that backsplash there. So, the carpenter understands that the stove is going to slide into the spot here, and that gap is not going to be visible. What they don't understand is how important it is to seal that gap, that when we leave ideal harborage for cockroaches like this, populations really grow. And so we went through and we pulled out all of those ranges and sealed up these gaps. Here's some other examples of gaps that provide great cockroach harborage down at baseboard level. The bottom example is in a bathroom, and the top example is in a kitchen. So again, we went back through and sealed up all of this after the fact. Another gap here where the trim piece there was just not put in tightly all the way up. And of course, that's great harborage for cockroaches. And then on the right, many of the countertops didn't meet up with the top of the cabinets, providing a great travel way and harborage for cockroaches. So we went through all the units and sealed those up. This was a case when we pulled out the stove. It was such a tight fit that the carpenter didn't put on the laminate on that countertop there. But of course, that's not going to work, because anything that spills on the countertop is going to spill over the top and then get absorbed by that particle board, and the particle board is going to swell over time, and then the countertop is going to start peeling up. So we had to go in and correct that. So we had some issues, particularly in the later floors, where the carpenters were being rushed to the point that they were taking shortcuts. And rather than cutting round holes for the plumbing penetrations to come through the back of the cabinet, they were just cutting out sections of that back of the cabinet to make it quicker and faster. And of course, now we have gaps between that cabinet wall and the rear wall here in this under sink cabinet that's going to allow cockroaches all the way through the back of those cabinets. So what we had to do was go back through and seal those, and we'll show you some pictures of those. Here's another cabinet that was cut quickly, cut short. You know, if you cut things short, you know it's going to fit in there, and you don't have to fuss with it. So that's what happened here. Another example here where, well, if we cut a bigger hole, we're sure it's going to fit, rather than taking the time to measure carefully and cutting appropriately. Another example here where the outlet box was put in improperly and too low for the cabinet, and so the cabinet base was just notched. Another example here, just a blind screw hole. Again, this stuff needs to be sealed up to prevent cockroach access. Another example, let's cut a big hole and it'll save us some time. And of course, all this needs to be sealed up to prevent access. Electrical penetration here, same deal. So here's an example of some of the corrections that we made. So each of the under sink cabinets had connections to the adjacent dishwasher on the other side of the cabinet wall here. And there was a large round hole cut there for those penetrations. What we did was took excluder material. This is the stainless steel mesh, and we stuffed that penetration to the dishwasher with that to create a tight seal. And that allows us, when we need to pull that excluder out to change a dishwasher, for example. So there's no sealant in there. That's just a very tight fit. I like to use the excluder blocks for something like that. They're 2-inch by 6-inch by 2-inch strips, and they work really well for that. And then there's some excluder used as well adjacent to that electrical outlet to seal that box up and still allow it to be removed if that electrical ever needs to be repaired or something needs to be replaced there. Here's some examples where we did seal in the excluder strips. I also use the 1-inch strips that come in rolls. They're easy to use in a situation like this. And what we did was used an elastomeric sealant, caulk with silicone in it, to glue this excluder permanently in place to clean up the issues there. So now, you know, no more harborage, no more travel ways behind the cabinets. So another thing that we did is we went through all of the units and sealed underneath the baseboard. So it was rare that the baseboard was really tight against the floor. There was almost always some sort of gap there. And again, we used a caulk plus silicone sealant, and the product that we use goes on white, so you can easily see where it's been applied, but then it dries clear. So the white lines that you see under the cabinet, along the baseboard, around the toilet, those all turn clear as that material dries and doesn't stand out at all. It looks very attractive. You know, there's a debate about whether you seal under toilets or not. I'm a toilet sealer. Some people are not. in this situation, in this community, we have residents, different income levels, different ages, different health statuses, different physical abilities, just like any community. What I find that happens is if you don't seal around that base of the toilet, you will over time invariably get urine spilling, for example, and getting underneath that toilet and ending up with odor issues. So I seal. At some point that toilet will have to be removed and that seal will have to be cleaned up and then replaced. So it's a little extra work, but I think it goes a long way in keeping that flooring in good shape. So if you have any kind of liquid going underneath that toilet, it's going to get soaked up by the cut edges of the flooring material and cause swelling and buckling over time. So I'm a sealer, and that's an example. We did that in all 48 units in the building, some with multiple lavatories. So this is an example of a behind a range. So when we pull out the oven and cooktop, you can see that there's an anti-tip bracket here. That's a tip off that we've got a range going in there. The baseboards weren't complete behind those. And of course, there are a number of reasons why you don't want to leave a situation like this. So number one, cockroach harborage. So there's space now between that floorboard and that back wall board. You can see there was a piece of wallboard scabbed in here to cover that gap between the bottom of the big piece of wallboard and the floor, and that gap wasn't sealed. So again, from the carpenter's perspective, nobody's going to see this. We can just leave it like this and then shove the stove in and we'll be fine and dandy. But so now we've got cockroach harborage. We've got gaps that might entice mice to chew through and make a larger hole in there because they can sense that airflow coming out through the gap and understand that there's a cavity back there that they could use for nesting. We're going to have an endless stream of food debris getting spilled, off that counter, off the back of that stove, and collecting in those gaps as well. So we went through the units and cleaned all this up, and now that's completely sealed. So here's another gap, just incomplete sealing, somebody in a rush doing this work, and we went back through and sealed that up for all the reasons I just mentioned, harborage, places for food to collect, and so forth. Other gaps. So the closets throughout the units have these doors, these accordion doors, and where the hinges were attached, there was often a gap right into the wall, so you could see the insulation, and of course that's creating a mouse hole for a mouse. So that's all work that we did. We sealed the bottom of the baseboard there, and then we stuffed those holes with excluder. Here's where the closing part of the door meets the wall, and again, the builders left gaps there, out of sight, out of mind, but we sealed them up. So this is a drain in an HVAC closet. We have the issue with the incomplete baseboard on the left, so we sealed up those gaps. And then I take some of that excluder material, which does allow air and liquids through, and just put it in around this bowl where the pipe is going through. If there was a leak, it would allow that liquid to go through that excluder and down the pipe chase there, but it doesn't allow cockroaches to use that space for harborage. Another example, HVAC closet, plumbing penetration. We followed up and sealed that up. The escutcheons were not sealed to the wall. So, that's certainly in the design document, pest prevention by design. But again, it was overlooked in the final construction. So we went back through and sealed all these penetrations. That red stuff that you see there is actually fire caulk. And it's not productive in this situation because it dries hard. And so what we would have to do would be to clean that up in order to push this scutcheon plate against the wall. And we put sealant behind it, so elastomeric sealant behind it before we do that, so that it stays attached to the wall. Another example, plumbing penetration. This one is sealed with excluder. Here's an example there of that escutcheon being held away from the wall by fire caulk, and we clean that up and seal it and push it against the wall, because if you have that escutcheon plate held off from the wall by a 1/4 inch, you're creating great cockroach habitat behind that plate, even if they can't get into the wall. So again, just cleaning up and sealing that escutcheon plate to the wall. Another example of plumbing penetration. We had multiple situations here where the plumbers didn't set the plumbing behind the wall with the proper spacing to allow the escutcheon plates to be put in place. So we use these split ring white plastic escutcheons on the drain pipes from the kitchen drains and the bathroom drains, and they work great. They go on very quickly, and most of the times they fit very tightly even without sealant. But here it's butting up against the metal water feed pipes escutcheon, so we can't get that seal, and it involves then cutting that plastic and then using sealant to close that gap. Another example here where the escutcheon plate couldn't be fit because of the placement of the plumbing, and the electrical box was too close, too tight. So that's I think a good overview of design issues and installation issues that we encountered in the building after it was turned over, and on the interior. And we also had some exterior issues as well, and we'll go through those. So just last week, Diane sends me a text and saying, "Hey Tom, can you look at this ground floor unit 119? The resident is reporting a squirrel building a nest." So here's a design issue that many of the units suffer. So the units have balconies constructed out of wood, as you see here. The first floor units have these ledges on top of the masonry. So the first floor walls are masonry, and then up from there, it's the wooden siding. And so there's a lot of these ledges in the outdoor patio areas of the ground floor units where that wall of that patio meets the joists for the deck for the unit above. And we had a squirrel already take advantage of that. And so I came over right away. I wanted to try to get that nest out of there before the squirrel had young ones in there. And I managed to do that successfully, clean that up. But we'll have to go back through and all of those cavities, we'll have to block them off. What I like to use is stainless steel mesh, doesn't rust, stays pretty looking, with a 1/4 inch mesh, and we'll just cut pieces and staple them there to close up those gaps. So another issue with the siding, so with the board siding on the building, is that the siding boards are not tight against the siding board below. And of course, there are multiple pests that are going to take advantage of that situation. So box elder bugs, stink bugs, lady beetles. And if they can get under that board, they most likely can figure out how to get into the building, that there will be some gaps in the flashing, in the wind and waterproofing. As you remember, we saw lots of examples of out of sight and out of mind. where they'll be able to find their way into the building. Perhaps not into the interior of the units, but into the walls of the building, because we've done a lot of sealing on the interior to keep them from getting into the units themselves. Here's some other gaps. So again, just kind of out of sight, out of mind. You can see that bead of sealant that are behind the black arrows there. So that individual sealed that up, but left these other gaps open. And some of these gaps are plenty big enough for bats to use, for example. And here, of course, is a bug coming up and going to take advantage of one of those gaps to spend the winter. So gaps between the butt ends of the siding boards need to be sealed as well. And just more examples of poor sealing, out of sight, out of mind sealing. So there were people who were responsible for going through and sealing all of these joints, but where it wasn't visible, they didn't pay close attention. The picture in the upper right is where that squirrel nest was. So I pulled all of that out, and you can see that there was already mold growing on the joists and the sill plate there from that wet material that the squirrel was wetting and shoving back in there for their nest. But you can also see lots of gaps. And so if you've got critters living up against your building and then you've got gaps like that, then you have potential for all sorts of lice and mites and so forth to get inside your building as well. Another example, flashing. So something like this, we would use excluder and stuff that. It would allow any moisture to come out through that underneath that flashing, but it would not allow critters to get in. Just more gaps here. And I can bet you dollars to donuts that sooner or later, some stinging insect is going to find that hole and make a nest in there, and then it's a big job to come and get rid of them. So really important to get these holes sealed up. It will save us a lot of time and money down the road. Okay, another example here, just a small gap, but just perfect for yellow jackets to nest in. Another gap. So this is very common these days where siding meets in the corner, that you have a plastic piece like this that runs up the side, or it might be an aluminum or a vinyl piece for aluminum or vinyl siding housing that has a cavity. And I've witnessed multiple times mice and chipmunks using this to create a nest and create a storage place for food for the winter. And again, excluder is a great material, very easy just to stuff in there. I would glue this in with a little sealant, so I would just squirt a little sealant in there and then stuff the excluder. It takes very little time to get that done, and it solves problems down the road. Once you get a rodent in there in a space like that, they're going to make themselves comfortable, and they're going to chew on the end of the siding board there, and cause lots of problems. And again, when they move out, they may be leaving parasites behind. So you just don't want to leave those harborages unsealed. So here's some masonry. This is out adjacent to the concrete ramp into the underground parking. And you can see, so we've got two major blocks of concrete meeting here. And there's an expansion joint there on purpose because you don't want to butt those up against each other as they heat and cool at different rates. They'll be pushing up against each other and cracking each other unless you leave a gap and then you stuff it with a material that's flexible, so it allows the concrete to expand and contract up against that flexible material without cracking. But if you leave gaps like this, you're going to end up with cracked concrete for sure in Wisconsin, because what will happen is rain and snow melt and ice melt will get in that gap, and then overnight it's going to freeze again, and that freezing is going to cause expansion, and it's going to crack that material. So if you're going to bother to put any kind of expansion joint material in here, you need to completely fill that gap to keep water from getting in that gap. What I do in a situation like this is there's a self-leveling material that comes in a large caulk tube, and you can squirt that in there, and it's when it dries, it stays flexible and will completely seal that up, and it's very easy to use. What I do is I use some foam backer rod that I'll stuff in there first and leave a couple inches on top of that backer rod for that liquid material to get in there and then dry and remain flexible, and that will prevent that issue of freezing and thawing and cracking, shortening the life of the concrete there. Okay, so finally, just wanted to get into some of the QA and QC issues. And, we're not putting all of this on the builders, and the builders have been really responsive to our inspections and also to this presentation, which we've shared with them. And we have a much better plan going forward for the second and third phases. But certainly, our idea of what might work, working with the builders, was not adequate. And we've learned a lot through this process that we're improving on ourselves. And part of that is the quality control and doing more frequent inspections and making sure that we're really clear in our communications with the builder about what we're after, what our goals are. So here, just missing sealant. So again, if you're being rushed through, even though this is visible and would be sealed, if adequate care was taken during the job, these are things we caught after the fact and sealed up. This is exterior here. So concrete masonry, you want to have weep holes. If moisture gets in behind, it needs to come out. And so this is a weep hole, and there's a material there that the builders use to stuff that weep hole that allows air and moisture to flow through, but doesn't allow pests in. But of course, this was done quickly and not adequately, and it leaves a big gap, which for sure, at some point or other, stinging insects are going to take advantage of. So just another example, poor follow-up inspection, big miss on the sealant here outside. So just a summary now on our last minutes before the question section. Things to think about as you're designing your renovation. Avoid cabinetry with unnecessary gaps built into the design that you're going to have to go in after the fact and seal up. Those gaps between the false storefronts in front of the sinks and the cabinets, we're not going to go through and seal all of those right now. But if a unit does get a cockroach introduction and ends up with a problem, we're going to go through and seal them at that point. But we're not going to invest the time and energy to do all of that now. I mentioned the HVAC closets, really important. We sent information out to the residents saying, hey, don't store anything in the HVAC closets. But that's really not practical when you've got that attractive storage space right next to the HVAC equipment. Or when you've got the laundry equipment in there already, you're not practicing what you're preaching. We've had some issues with the carpet transitions. Again, that was more of a quality assurance issue where the carpet was cut too short and the edge of that carpet didn't stick far enough through the transition cover there to stay in there and have the edges be protected. So some of that's had to be redrawn. redone. And then when you're designing the exterior, you want to avoid protrusions that are sticking out that might make bird roosts or nesting or cavities like that squirrel was taking advantage of. And where you do have those protrusions and cavities, you're going to have to go back through and use things like spikes on protrusions and use barriers like netting or stainless steel mesh on the cavities to keep the critters out. And then I won't go through all of this, but we put this together as a a detailed list of things that we're trying to avoid. And you can access the presentation on Susanna's website and download it and print this out to use it. So these, rather than giving the builders a 40-page document that they then gave to the architects, which really wasn't paid attention to the extent that we thought it would be, we have this shortcut, which is only 2 or 3 pages that focuses on the gaps that we saw in this phase 1 to make it easier for the designers and builders to address our goals. So definitely you want to make sure right at the design phase that you're getting this information to your architects and they understand why that this is over and above the fireproofing that they're used to dealing with. This is pest prevention and we want it in the specifications. And then you really have to partner with the builder and supplement their oversight because their people are not trained to recognize the stuff that we're trained around pests. You want to expect all units. So in this first phase, we just did a sampling of units. And then when the building was turned over, we found all these other issues in the other units that we needed to address. And then a great idea, if you can do it, would be to fully complete a model unit. So we could have done that. We could have our first phase, for example, have been a smaller building where we could have gone through this process with the designers and the builders and gotten everything right there before we built a 48-unit 4-story building to learn on. Okay, so thanks very much for participating, and I hope this was helpful. And certainly reach out to me if I can be of any help to you. To talk this through, to meet with your builders and designers. That's the kind of work that I love doing and have been very effective at. And now that I've got this learning experience under my belt, I'll be much better this next time around and with our phases 2 and 3 here. So I think we've done well on time. We have time for questions, is that?
Yes, yeah, we do. Before I get on into a couple questions, I just want to mention to the audience, it's not too late. Type your question in the Q&A or the chat. I'm keeping an eye on both. But Phil Hurst brought up door sweeps, which are really important. And I'm wondering if you had talked to the contractor about door sweeps and how satisfied you were with them sealing the doors.
Great. So that's something that we did talk about early on, and door sweeps is so important to install them properly. And I've been on so many site visits, new buildings, old buildings with new door sweeps, where the people putting the door sweeps on, weren't trained to think pest, and have these beautiful, expensive door sweeps put on. And there's a 1/4 or a 1/2-inch gap in the middle or on the ends, and that you might as well not have a door sweep. So that was one thing that we decided to do ourselves from the beginning. And we went back through and installed the excluder door sweeps on all of the interior doors leading out into the hallways in the 4-story building, but also on the stairwell doors, and we just recently completed that work on the trash room doors. So the exterior doors have really good sills, the metal sills that have a lip on them, so it doesn't require a door sweep. So we were good there, but all the interior doors, including the stairwell doors into the parking garage, I did those sweeps myself. And the excluder door sweeps are great. They're super heavy duty. They hold up well. And they have that excluder material, that stainless steel mesh embedded in there so that rodents can't chew through them. Good question. Really important.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I'm having trouble keeping up, so I'll ask a question and then I'll go back to reading some of the new questions that came in. Can you just mention, I think you said don't use foam. What about using foam with a metal mesh, or just avoid foam, like foam sealants completely?
I avoid them because I've seen them chewed through so many times. So, foam expands. And the sealant, when I use a sealant and then I push the excluder into the sealant, I'm not leaving an edible gap there. Whereas if you're using foam, that stuff's expanding, it's pushing whatever you're using with it away from it as it's expanding, and you don't want to leave any room. Think about it. A mouse can get through the gap the size of a pencil or your little finger. If you've got that much foam there, a mouse can chew through that foam and get through that gap that they just made. So I really prefer not to use foam.
Okay. And a couple questions. Well, a trickier question. I'll put you on. Any tips on making a door sweep work on uneven thresholds or entryways?
Oh my goodness. Yes. have done that many times. And it means making it even. So for example, Lexi, who manages the community here, I mouse-proofed her garage, and the concrete slab had settled over the years, and that garage door came down and that slab was like this. And so what we did was, I scabbed on a triangular shaped piece of wood onto the bottom of her door, and then put the sweep on that, and that worked. So I'm going to do another job later on this week where it's going to mean completely removing that door sill down to the masonry and replacing it because it's bent out of shape. And so many times you'll see that, including in new buildings, when they're pulling appliances in with hand trucks, you've got a beautiful new door sill there, metal door sill, and it gets all bent out of shape, right at the very beginning because of all this heavy stuff that's being moved in and out during construction. So a lot of times you just have to rebuild those, but you can, like I did in that one case, scab on pieces of wood to make an even surface. It may not be level, but if you make it even, you can get it to work.
Okay.
That elastomeric stuff that comes in the caulk tube that is self-leveling is great for those situations too. So if you have broken up concrete or seam in the concrete, you can use that self-leveling stuff to make a level surface. Or floor leveling compound is another thing you can use. You mix it up and you make it a liquid consistency so that you can pour it on a surface and it will level that surface. You can do the same thing with concrete, just make it really liquidy mix.
Okay, Philip asks, I think he's trying to ask, how does the excluder mesh work for roaches? Does it make it not hospitable or irritating for the roaches? We understand, how it works for rodents, but what is it doing with the roaches?
So basically, you're eliminating any gap there by stuffing that stuff in really tightly. So when I'm using excluder, there is no gap left that a cockroach can get through. If they tried to squeeze themselves in there, they would get ripped to shreds by the sharp metal ends that are exposed on the excluder. So I'm just not leaving any gap there for them.
We have a couple of statements and questions that are kind of related about working strategies with working with contractors. Mike says, we're asking them a lot, and in the current business climate, a lot of contractors are understaffed. They may be less than responsive to clients who have a lot of questions and demands. So I'm going to read a couple comments before you answer this, so you can kind of hear where people are coming from, the issues that people are bringing up. How do you suggest approaching the importance of thorough exclusion during the planning and proposal stage in a way that doesn't scare off contractors? And then also another question from James, any tips for dealing with, he said customers, but is possibly means contractors that won't budge on contributing to fixing the problems. Do you just do all the ceiling work yourself? And Chris Geiger had a little bit of answer to that. He said, we have the same experience with contractors and subcontractors not following construction documents and requirements. We were able to organize mid-construction trainings for the crew, and that seemed to be helpful. This may not be practical in other situations. And he says he's happy to talk directly. And Ruth writes, it's interesting that so much work needs to be done regarding the relatively simple step of sealing. What type of outreach would you recommend to builders and architects about the why of sealing? Seems like a lot of work is done with the expectation that it's enough when it's far from. It's the attitude of the builder that it's the resident's fault if there's a pest problem and not their problem. Would there be opportunities to address the perception?
Should I jump in there with this?
Yeah, that was kind of a couple comments that were relatively similar. Like, how do we work? What's your approach?
Yeah, so that that really was our story, and what we learned is you just can't hand over a 40-page document, even with highlights on the important parts, and expect that to be followed. Can we long-term educate builders and architects? Well, that was part of the purpose of that document that Chris Geiger led development of. I don't think it's penetrated the industry. So I think it's really up to the buyer to educate the designer and the builder, and to make it as easy as possible. So boil down that 40-page document into exactly what you want. Make sure it gets into the specs. Make sure you see it there. Make sure you reinforce with the builder that it's in there and that's what you want. Make sure that you're doing interim inspections and training, like was mentioned. I mean, we did that, but it was too late in the process. And, and that's where we realized we had this huge disconnect in communication where, we were getting assured, oh, no, we have to do all that for fire safety. This is nothing new. We have to do that for fire safety. No, it's beyond fire safety, as that one comment was. It's beyond. And you have to make that extra effort to make it as easy as possible for them to do it on any job, big or small. And then part of that is set up your division of labor. So on these next couple of phases, we already know what part I'm going to be doing and what part they're going to be doing in terms of this remedial stuff. So we're not going to slow down their construction. We're not going to add costs that they're not anticipating into the process after the fact by telling them, hey, we meant this. We've got that built into it now, and we've got the division of labor set up rationally. So I'll be doing the stuff that they know that they're not going to get right to our specs. And as you could see from that construction, it was obvious that the builders were being rushed, the carpenters were being rushed, the plumbers were being rushed, and that's not going to happen these next couple of times. And the builder did pay for a lot of this after the after the fact sealing, which is going to help reinforce their need to do that the first time around, when it would have been less expensive than all the retrofits that we had to do. So some of my comments there.
Great. This is probably going to be a side conversation, but this person is just came in as anonymous attendee. But I would encourage maybe this person to reach out to you by email. They said, considering the amount of time needed to apply sealants aesthetically, how do you price this work that included mostly excluder mesh and sealants? That might
Really
not
good question.
be.
Time and materials. Time and materials. Couldn't do it any other way because, you know, every unit was different. There was no way that we could have gone through that 4-story building and given an estimate, an accurate estimate. And you don't want that work to be rushed. You want that work to take the time that's needed to get it right. And it's going to pay off big dividends in the end. And in the end, it wasn't that expensive. So the after work was probably a total of about $15,000, including the trash room doors and the cost of the door sweeps. I'd say between 15 and 20,000. So it didn't break the bank, on a multi-million-dollar rebuild project here. And it will be less costly in the next 2 phases because everybody's going to be doing their job correctly.
Okay,
I'm not done with it.
David Evans wrote that, he asked, will the lesson be emailed out? I'll just say that that's on the website. The presentation is on the website, and I will be posting the recording too. But he also brought up that he was able to get a child nutrition program to pay $24,000 for excluder door sweeps on all dry storage. I'm not sure what the building was, but it's just a good comment to look for, alternative sources of funding for these things, because it is absolutely a food safety issue. Assuming that connection was made. Also, let's see. Vegetate. Do you discourage vegetation growing against and around the perimeter of the buildings? If so, what would you recommend for the distance for vegetation? And that just reminded me that there is a part 2 to pest prevention by design that is landscapes, and I'll put that also on the website. I neglected to put that newer document on, but I will let you answer that. And David Evans said school kitchens. Great, thank you. So the nutrition program paid for the door sweeps on school kitchens. Back to the question: the vegetation growing against and around the perimeter of a building. What do you suggest for that?
Yeah, so I would look at that landscape document for specifics because it varies. So, a tree, distance between a tree branch and the roof, that has to be really long. And I can't remember right now what it should be because there are critters that can jump a good distance. You'll see them get a running start up a branch and then go flying through the air onto the roof of a building, squirrels, for example. So that's quite a distance that you don't want branches near the roof of a building. Down around ground level, it really varies there too. I want to be able to move between the building and the vegetation when I'm doing inspection, because I'm down there on my belly and I'm feeling up underneath that siding to see where the gaps are. So, I want a couple of feet of space there, and I don't always get it. Almost more important is the type of vegetation. You don't want vegetation that obscures the ground. So I saw that at a school that I visited and consulted with this past week in Chicago. There were rodent burrows where they had low-growing shrubs that weren't trimmed, 6 inches up from the ground. The rodents were using that cover to put their burrows there. They don't want an owl, hanging up in a tree waiting for them to come out of the burrow at night. They want the entrance to the burrow to be obscured by something growing above it. So ivy, for example, doesn't matter how far away that is from the building. If you have ground covering ivy, you're going to get rodent burrows if you've got, rats in your area. So really important that you design the vegetation so that you don't have things growing up against the building and scratching the building and carrying ants and so forth onto your building. So, a couple feet away from the building at ground level is good. But even more important, use vegetation that's upright growing, where you can trim the lower portions of that to expose the ground so that you're not creating habitat for rodents like we see in the picture here.
Yeah, I'll make sure that I add that pest prevention by design for landscapes resource to the homepage. And that was really helpful. I've noticed in a lot of buildings, I always take a picture when buildings have about 2 to 3 feet of gravel, like big 2-inch size gravel up against the building, because that's fantastic, especially if you have, all sorts of critters can make their homes in the mulch or the vegetation. So if we can push that away from the buildings, I think that's better, especially for rodent burrows, but also, some of the cockroach species that like to hang out in organic material, like an oriental cockroach or American cockroaches, that could be out in nature enjoying that mulch as well. So that gravel.
I have a comment there too. So I like to use up against the building pea gravel. So not the larger stone, but pea gravel. So often a lot of my rodent exclusion work here is digging out around the foundation, siding, junction, because over time people keep applying mulch, and then the siding is actually underground and it starts to rot and the rodents chew right through it. So it means pulling all of that out and then excavating, and then I fill that excavation with pea gravel because rodents can't dig through it. So they can start to dig in it and the pea gravel just collapses into the hole. Whereas the bigger gravel, sometimes you can get gaps where you can stick your finger through, and if you can stick your finger through, a rodent can get through those larger stones to make a nest. And often what I'm doing is up against that siding foundation is gluing excluder in all the way around, because otherwise you get rodents chewing up. You've only got a couple inches between the bottom siding board and the ground, and they're there on their hind legs and they're chewing right up underneath that siding where that junction is. So that's a lot of my work. That's why I've got biceps now from doing this work, because trenching.
All right, one more question. I didn't notice that Chris, I didn't scroll down to see Chris's latest comment. One comment he made when he said he did trainings with the builder, they were billed as inspections. So getting them to the site to look at these things and then take advantage of training. But he also asked if you have you been able to work in league with any energy conservation projects to get more leverage on projects?
So that's a great question. We actually met with the neighboring town last month with very much that focus. So they already have a team that's doing these energy inspections of their affordable housing projects, and they heard about our work here. And next month we're going to do some joint inspections and see if we can get some efficiencies into that process. So we'll have an energy expert looking at that. We'll have me looking at the pest issues, and then we'll get everything done all at once. And we won't be tripping over each other or making problems for each other in the process.
All right, well, maybe a topic for a future webinar. I'm taking notes, and we are at 1:15. And Tom and Diane, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I hope that you got a chance to look at the chat. I'll keep it open for a little while longer before I shut down the meeting, because there's some really nice positive comments about everyone enjoying the presentation. So thank you all so much for joining us. Again, visit the StopPests website for some of these resources and email us if you have any questions. Thanks, everybody.